Nice to meet you. Nice to Zoom meet you.
And to you as
Since
well.
this lockdown, I have done normally I'm behind my cart, which is over there,
Okay, yeah.
and I never talk to people, and I just listen and do that. And since lockdown, I've spoken to so many people; it's just been mad.
I know it's like you're on the other side now.
I know people are making me speak.
What is this? What these people? I don't know. I don't know.
What they like. What do they want to hear from me?
Wanting to interview you, and I don't know. It's just
Talk about stuff.
It's not on. It's just not on.
I'm telling you. Oh.
Okay, so welcome, Judi Lee-Headman, to AV on the Edge. Thanks for speaking to us. So let's start at the beginning. So let's just find out how you got into sound and why specifically location work.
Well, location work is my latest incarnation of my career. When I first started, I was an assistant. And then after some years as an assistant, I went into TV studios. And I did that for a little while. You can imagine I started in the 80s, so that the environment was quite tough for a Black woman. I don't tend to use woman of color because I just think I'm a Black woman, and that's what I say when people start saying, oh, well, there's a woman of color. I say, stop there. Just, So the atmosphere and the environment in that time was very tough for Black women, Black people generally. So I tended to try to get into the different areas of sound because I didn't know which bit I was going to be able to stay in because the environment was so challenging. So I was working as an assistant in film, and then I go and work in TV studios as well, getting my experience that way, so that if it didn't work out in film, at least I had some grounding in TV and vice versa. And also the environment in that time was that it was very frowned upon if you worked in both areas. So I wouldn't tell each side that I went off to assist on a film or that I'd been assisting in a TV studio, just because either you're in film or you're in TV, and never the twain shall meet. So, but for me, because I so love doing sound, I thought, well, I've just got to take the opportunity wherever I can. If I get a gig working in TV, I'll go and do that. If I get a gig working on assisting on a film, I'll go and do that, just so that whatever job comes along, I've got the experience and know what to do and can do it, because the opportunities at that time were quite thin on the ground. So that was the beginning. That was the beginning. So,
and what were the kind of challenges you did face? Because you mentioned sort of it, being obviously a very challenging time, to say the least, for Black women.
I tell my assistants now stories of the things I went through, and their jaws are just on the floor. Because in the 80s, so if you remember around in the 80s, racism was something of a joke. It was when things were said racist, when racist expressions were said, it was couched in the term of it's just banter. So you shouldn't take it as racist. It's not racist if I call you a spear chucker, because I was a boom operator. So if somebody called me a spear chucker, I shouldn't take that as a racist term. That's just banter. So when we're in the studio, when we're in a TV studio, so the lights go down, so they're just lighting the set. So somebody would walk past me and say, "Smile, Jude, I can't see you."
Wow.
So all of these things. So then in amongst all that, you also had the sexism stuff. So somebody would say, "If I get you some beads, are we all right? If I get you some beads, are we okay?" Because they'd seen old black and white movies where in order to get one of the native women, you just had to give them some beads.
Wow.
So you get all of that sort of stuff, and you just have to make up your mind, I'm going to not take this to heart, because if I take this to heart, I'm walking out the door. I mean, one example was, in TV studios, they have what they call the Fisher boom, which is the boom that you sit on, and it's got a telescopic pole with the microphone on the end. So I used to be a boom operator, and we were doing a comedy show. And one of the sets was a sex shop, like the old Soho sex shops with all kinds of gadgets and bits and pieces. So some of the props that were on set were these horrible blow-up dolls, and they had pink ones and brown ones. So somebody in the crew thought it was a really good idea during the tea break to unpack one of those and tie it onto my boom in the working position. And they made two signs. And one side said, Judi Standard, and the other one said Judi Deluxe. So the standard side was put around the neck of the dummy on the boom. And then the other sign was left there so that when I came back from tea, I would take that sign and put that sign on. So I'm Judi Deluxe. And I don't know if you've ever seen these blow-up dolls. They're just hideous. They're these horrible, stiff plastic things with a mouth about that big. And the guy that did it, honestly, if I'd have been a man, I would have punched him down on the spot. But what I had to do was just take the dummy off. And what they did as well was, there was 5 cameras shooting this scene. So all 5 cameras turned to this thing on the boom. And in the gallery, they thought it was the funniest thing ever. Everybody was laughing and joking. Oh, yeah, isn't that funny? Yeah, Judi Standard. And you're just like, okay. So, all right, guys, you've had a good laugh. That's coming off. And that was it. But those were the sort of things that I encountered day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. Somebody would have to find something to say to remind me that I am Black or female or both. There wasn't a day that somebody didn't come and say something, because they just felt like they couldn't see me and not comment on my presence in the studio or on location. That was the norm back then.
Wow. That's something else.
It was tough. It was tough back then.
As far as now, there's been definite improvements, or is it just the language has changed?
It's much more subtle. It's much more subtle now. In those days, it was very overt, because that was it. That was the ethos of that time. You had Love Thy Neighbor, Mind Your Language, all of those sort of programs that made it okay to laugh at Black folk and make fun of them. So therefore, it was okay to say nignog and all the different words that they used. It was okay to say all that. Now it's much more subtle. Nobody will actually say stuff like that. It's done in a much more, which to me is almost more dangerous. Because if somebody says something overt, you know exactly where they are. Now it's so subtle. You know, we've got euphemisms like BAME, diverse, people of color. So we've been rebranded, but they're still signifiers to let people know we are not a white man. So I'm part of a diverse crew now.
Right.
Or I'm a BAME sound recordist. What the hell's BAME? Do you know what I mean? So from then to now, the subtle rebranding has taken place. So the names are still called, but they're just slightly different names.
So you managed to navigate all of that craziness.
Yes.
And then dealing with the film, TV sort of dynamic. Moving forward of your career, sort of navigating the sort of film and TV world, how did you move forward from there then?
I think tenacity, really. You just keep doing jobs and you try to form relationships with people who are like-minded, because I did a lot of documentary stuff before I started doing drama, the work I'm doing now. So I would work with the same camera operators. There'd be maybe 3 or 4 camera operators, and I would work with them. And once they got over that I am me, but I could do the job, then I'd be their first port of call if they were going to, Africa or Latin America, or, it wasn't, oh, well, we'll only call Judi if we wanted to do a Black job. We'll call Judi because she's good. So I got to do some fantastic work in terms of documentary stuff, because those guys got the jobs, and then their next call after they get the job would be to call me. So that was quite good. So in terms of advancing myself, it was forming relationships or forming working relationships with people who could see past my race and gender and just knew I was bloody good at the job, and I'd get the job done and they would get the results that they wanted. So that was the way forward. And I went freelance in 85. So if I worked with somebody who I found had less than perfect ideas towards race or gender, the great thing about freelance was I only had to work with them once. And, that would be it. And then I'd go back to working with the teams that I'd always worked with or that I worked with more regularly. So that was my way forward. And also the producers that I worked with, as they evolved through the industry, they were doing documentaries, and they do a single drama, then they do a drama series. Likewise, they would call me for when they got stuff. So it was evolving a network of people who were happy to use me and weren't bothered by race or gender. They just knew, we'll get Judi because she'll do the job.
Right. So let's talk about being good at the job. So what does that look like for what you do? So how, for instance, how early are you brought on? What kind of discussions are you having with directors and things like that?
Okay. Wow. That's a really good question. It really depends. It varies from project to project. The show that I'm on now, or just about to resume, I did season 2 in 2018. So I was interviewed or had the meeting in the October. We didn't start shooting until the following April.
And this is Britannia.
Yeah, this is Britannia. The producer always tells people I was one of the first people he hired. You know, I went for a half an hour meeting and we were still talking an hour and a half later. But, you know, once people understand that I know what I'm talking about, I get the scripts beforehand. So I'll read the script. I have a good understanding of what the show's about and what I can bring to the show. And we talk about that. And for a lot of people who haven't worked with me before, that first few minutes is them deciding, look, this is a black woman. It isn't one of our usual sound blocks that we have. I've got to get past that and listen to her. And once they get past that and listen to me, invariably, touch wood, I get the gig. I think by the time they've decided to see me, they've already done their research. They've already looked at my credits. They've already looked at the sort of stuff I've done and decided, yeah, she certainly got the credits. And what it's more about is my personality. They're deciding whether they think they can work with me. And I'm very serious on my work. If I'm doing something and it's not right, I will make my point known, but I make my point known in a way that it's not, I don't sort of stand up in the middle and say, this is shit, we have to stop right now. Do you know, people can do that. Some people do that and they're known for doing that, but I wouldn't get very much work if I did that because it's you know as well as I do that sometimes you might make an objection and people go, oh, look, he's kicking off. And you're not kicking off at all. You're just raising a point that this particular thing is not going to work. And because it's contrary to what somebody else is thinking, well, you're kicking off. So you have to know how to raise an opinion. You have to know how to raise an objection. And you have to know how people's egos are, because 99% of the time, I'm the only woman in the technical team. So if the lighting director's done dreadful lighting and I've got to get booms in there, I've got to not tell him that the lighting's crap. I've got to find another way to navigate around his ego. Not the lighting I've got to navigate around. I've got to navigate around his ego to say, yeah, I really love your lighting. I wonder if you can help us by giving us this corridor to get some booms in, or would you be able to help us? So it's about creating the idea that you're helping me.
Right.
You know, rather than, you've really stitched me up here, mate. Do you know? You have, in actual fact, he may have stitched me up, but it's how I approach now to get that sorted. And I think that's the way I've had to evolve my work. I don't know if that answers your question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, and that's really important as well to think about how to approach those kind of discussions as well, and those kind of conflicts, I guess, or issues. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm brought in pretty early, I would say. After they've got the directors and everything, I'm brought in after that, because obviously then I will go and meet the directors. And so on things like what I'm doing, there may be 3 or 4 directors, but I will be the person that goes through the whole project. So I will be introduced to those directors fairly early on while we're still in prep. And then they can address any questions they have to me as regards to the way they want to cover a particular scene or a particular sequence, or they're going to do a particular thing. Will it work for sound, or what will we need to do to make it work? So I'm their point of call then for sound, really.
Okay. And so the day of the shoot, what does that look like?
Okay, so it really depends. So we will get, depending on the size of the show, we can get anything from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, maybe more, prep. And in that time, what I'll do is I'll see costume department, I'll see hair and makeup, I'll see, read the script again, see locations. So are we at the coast? Are we in the inner city? All of these have an impact on what sort of kit I'm going to need. Because if we're at the coast, we're going to need more and more wind protection for the mics because it's very windy by the coast. If we're in the inner city, I'm going to maybe need to make my kit a little bit smaller because a lot of the times we can't park or can't get near, or we're somewhere where there's a lot of radio interference. For example, we did one sequence where we had our artists on radio mics, and next door was a bingo hall. The bingo caller was on the same frequency. So suddenly they could hear part of our drama over their bingo calling. So we had to rush in and switch our mics off and change frequencies because they only had one frequency in the bingo hall. So all of these things, as part of your prep, you go and you find out where the locations are, what hazards there might be for sound within those locations. So you need to do all of that beforehand, and you will see costume, because you need, if it's a historical drama, you need to see if you can get microphones fitted into some of the costumes, because some of the costumes are quite elaborate. So once the artists get on set, you don't want to be trying to lift up layers and layers and layers of costume to get mics on. You want to have those sewn in if need be, or built in if need be. If there's elaborate hair, you need to see if you might need to put a mic in it. If you need to put a mic in it, you don't want to wait until it's all done and say, oh, God, can I just do that? You want to speak to hair and makeup. So there's a lot of advanced work done with all the different departments. Introducing yourself for the first thing, making them aware that you respect their craft, and can they help you? Can we collaborate in terms of me getting mics into different difficult costumes or difficult hair pieces? Or if it's a props, is there a way that we can make the props quieter so that when the artists are using them, they're not crashing their lines with something that's rattly or noisy or bubbly? So all of these things, you do a lot of prep before day one of shooting, because on day one of shooting, you say, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to cover it. You don't wait until day one to decide what to do. You have all of that prep done. So when the director comes to set, you're just as ready as they are. You don't sort of, well, I'm not sure what we're going to do here. Never do that. Obviously, you want to have maybe one or two plans in your mind that if they decide to shoot in the completely opposite way to what they said on rehearsal, you've got plan B ready. Okay, yeah, we can cover it. No problem. Carry on.
So with all that you've got to do, are you working with assistants? Is there a team around you?
Yes. Yeah. I have a team of 3. So the sound team is 4 of us. So there's myself and 3. So 2 people specialize with the floor, and then the third person works with me, who's a trainee. So that person we're training up, and they will work through, they'll assist with the second sometimes, they'll assist with the first sometimes, so they understand what the roles are, what the different roles are, and what's expected of the different roles. And when it's slightly quieter, each one will give them a little go of what to, being a second or being a first. In the less critical scenes, obviously, if it's a really critical scene, obviously you can't do that.
So when you say the first and the second?
Yeah. Okay, so you have 2 boom operators, for example. So the first is the person who is my eyes and ears on the floor. They will supervise who gets mics on that day, in what order the mics appear, when those people are going to appear on. Because even though we've got the script in front of us, depending on how the director blocks it, it may not be immediately obvious. So they will watch the rehearsal, the first rehearsal, which is called a blocking, and say, okay, Jude, look what, it says we've got 3 people, but the other 2 don't come on until after lunch. So I only need to mic up so-and-so, or all 3 of them are going to be on, or 1 and 2 are going to be on, or 1 and 3 are going to be on. So they see the rehearsal and they communicate back to me exactly how the director wants to shoot it. We may have mic'd all 3 people in while they were getting dressed, and then find out that only 2 of them are needed. So what will happen then is the number 2 person will go off to costume and turn their mics off or adjust their mics. And number 1 person stays on set and keeps an eye on what's going on. So at any given moment, if the director changes his mind or decides to bring a scene forward, we're always across that. My 2 assistants aren't out somewhere miking up. And then when we come to start turning, we don't know what's happened on the floor because it's all changed. Similarly, the first assistant will look at lighting. We'll look at what the lighting director's doing. So if there's any potential issues, they can flag them up before we're ready to turn over. So the key is we don't want to leave anything until the last minute and then go, oh, excuse me, you don't want to ever do that. You always want to try and preempt what's happening and have plans ready in place for that. So that if they decide that they want to shoot it in total darkness, we can cover it. If they want to shoot it in stadium lighting, we can cover it. Just be prepared, really.
So there's going to be like a number of shots, scenes,
Yes.
takes. So I'm
Yes.
guessing there's a lot of notes that you're taking while you're doing this.
Yes. So an example would be on a show I did called AD, which was set in biblical times. In Pontius Pilate's office room, this very sparse Roman room, was two braziers, these open fires. That was the illumination for the room. Now, they looked wonderful. They're cast iron, elaborate devices with flames and all this lot. He's in the middle delivering a speech. The first time we did it, I'm listening to his speech. So the guy's got a wonderful voice. I can hear something boiling. I say to my team, what's boiling? We look on set and, he's got this wonderful table, very ornate chair, and he's his full regalia. But I can hear boiling. It's the two braziers either side of him. And what they've done is that they've got a metal container with the flammable liquid in. They've placed it in a metal bowl of water. They've lit it just before the take. And as the take progresses, the water starts boiling within this thing. So I've got two of these things boiling.
Nightmare.
So now I'm writing boiling water all over the dialogue. So what we have to do then is say to the director, these two braziers are an issue. Can the burners be taken out of water and put on a bed of sand? Because even though the flammable liquid will get hot, the burner will stay static, because what was happening, it was doing that in the water. It was moving as the water was boiling. This thing was moving. So things like those, you do make notes. And obviously, it depends on the director. If he thinks he can cut around it, then once I've informed him, I let it go. But if I know that he can't cut around it, then I will say, can we have a couple of minutes, talk to the special effects people and say, can we get some sand just to adjust this? Sometimes they're in a good mood and they'll say yes. Other times, oh, no, we haven't got any sandy, we'll have to go with it. In which case I'll say to the director, you will have to revoice this because you've got boiling water all over the dialogue.
Right.
And it's their call. All I can do in terms of giving notes is to say, this is the issue in this moment. A recent thing I was doing, we're shooting outside in a garden in the center of London. It's a very hot day. We're surrounded by flats. The windows are open. People are singing to the radio. You can't see which flat it is. You can just hear somebody singing off key to a song. But your scene is a very close-up shot of somebody who's clearly not singing. All you can do is say to the director, this is an issue. What do you want to do about it? Do you want to wait until that person's finished singing, or are we going to revoice? And that's, it's what I'm saying is advisory. I'm not saying you must. I'm just saying this is what's happening in this time. So when you go into the edit and you listen to this, you'll hear your actor, but you'll also hear in the distance somebody singing to Britney Spears.
Fair enough. So technically, you've got obviously the camera, you've got your sound, and then you've got to synchronize them. So your equipment is running with Timecode.
Timecode, yeah.
Yeah.
So how that works is I have a timecode generator on that cart there. That is the master timecode generator. So I send a feed of it to my recorder. So it generates timecode to my recorder. And then I have little boxes called locket boxes, which are attached to all the cameras. And this master timecode generator sends out a pulse to all of those to keep them on the same timecode as being fed to my machine. And so everything shows the same time code. So when they go into post and to the edit, they'll see the master time code, both on my machine and on the camera. And that's basically how it's done. Obviously, if they do vary speed or anything, they go off time, then the time code isn't registered. But as soon as they go back to the right speed, then the time code restarts.
Okay.
So that's how it's done. Sometimes I have a digi-slate, but I'm generally not.
So as well as doing sort of the dialogue, are you called upon to help with effects, like doing sort of room tone and?
Yes, we'll do room tone, and we will do any specific effects that are relevant to the show. So anything that we see, if somebody's hammering or something like that, if they're hammering steel on steel, of course we'll get that. If they're hammering on something that's dressed to look like steel, we won't bother, because obviously they can put that in as a Foley and as a sound effect later on. But primarily, my job is to get as clean dialogue as possible. So if we've got a costume that is very squeaky, like the Roman legionnaires' leather epaulets, we'll do the dialogue again with not epaulets, with I've forgotten the name of it, but those Roman uniforms.
Yeah,
they're very, very squeaky. So we will do the dialogue again with that taken off, so the dialogue editor can then repair any squeaks with dialogue.
So are you in contact with the post team, the post-production team?
Before I start shooting, I have a chat. I'll ask who the post house is. 9 times out of 10, it's a post house who I've worked with before, so I'll just touch base with them and say, hey, it's me, how you guys are doing, whatever. If not, I'll introduce myself to them, and I'll talk about how I'm presenting rushes, if there's anything specific that they want differently, how I track lay, things like that, I will tell them up front. So if it's stuff that they don't want, then I'll say, okay, fine, I won't do it that way. But generally what I'm doing is pretty much industry standard in terms of 48, 24-bit. That's pretty much industry standard. Just find out what the frame rate is. So if it's for a US thing or a UK thing, make sure. So, just touch base on the basics and not make assumptions as to how it should be delivered. Just say, this is what I'm going to do. Is this okay? So with post, I just touch base and just check the basics with them. You don't ever want to make any assumptions. So if you touch base with them, send them an email saying, this is what I'm going to be doing. Is this cool? They'll say, yes, it's cool. Or we're shooting this way, whatever. Similarly, when I've shot some stuff, I'll just ring them up and say, how's everything? Is everything okay for you? Or if I've got a particular issue with some costume or the way a person is speaking, you get some actors who get into this method thing of not speaking very loudly. I'll give them a heads up and say, hey, Joe Schmo actor doesn't want to ever give us any level. So here's a heads up. We've asked, he's closely mic'd, we've done what we can on the floor, over to you. So I keep a dialogue going with them. I think it's really important. They're the other side of my team. So I keep a dialogue with them and say, look, this is what we're doing. This is how we're trying to mitigate certain things, but we're not winning. So we'll need some help.
So to jump to something else actually now, because I saw you worked on an episode of Homeland.
Yeah.
Which I loved. That show is stressful.
Man. Yes, that show, I did the Morocco unit. I did the Morocco unit on season 6. I sat on that set and I looked through my monitor and I was like, I'm doing Homeland. Wow. I mean, I have done American TV before, so it wasn't that it was an American show. It was just that it was Homeland, and I loved Homeland. The Americans work in a slightly different way. Once you get on set, you start shooting until they stop, which can be 16 hours later. The expression hit the ground running is designed for them.
Right.
You absolutely get on there and you just boom, keep going. Right, we're on to the next bit, onto the next bit. And you really have to just be on your toes.
So how long are the days in the UK then? Like how different is it?
11-hour days. 11-hour days. So
and that's set by union. Is that a union
it's
thing?
Evolved now. I mean, people used to work ridiculous hours, but it's gradually evolving. I think after 10 hours, it's a diminishing return. People are so tired that we can go take after take after take, but they're just tired. That you're not going to get much more out of the artist if they're tired, really, and you can see it in their eyes also.
So how was it? I mean, technically, how was it working in that way?
Well, on Homeland or working for Americans?
Well, both, yeah. Spill the beans.
They're great. They are great. It's a lot of fun. They are. I mean, I've been very, very lucky. The teams that I've worked with have been really fun, really excellent. I've worked in Morocco a lot. I think one of the reasons I got that particular Homeland is that I've done a lot of work in Morocco. So I have a sound team in Morocco that I always use, who work on everything from Gladiator, American Sniper. Their CVs are better than mine. they are the business, these Moroccan guys. But as soon as I get a gig in Morocco, my next call is, are you two free? Because I have a team of 2 down there. As soon as I know they're free, I was like, yeah, right, I'm ready to go. And they were with me on Homeland. And because they work with Americans all day, every day, they work with international crews all day, every day, it was just a pleasure to work with them because they totally know the setup. They totally know how the Americans work. They totally know how they like things set. So me going down, it was just like slotting in, okay, we're going to be doing this stuff where we've got a lot of gunfire going on. We're going to be doing some stuff where we're on the Palestine-Israeli border, it's a location dressed as a Palestine-Israeli border. You get down there and you look at the location, it really does look like it. And working, the section I did was with the guy, Saul, and he's really lovely, very, very nice. Couldn't do enough to help us. And that made life a lot easier because obviously he'd never worked with me before. And sometimes when you're working with artists who haven't worked with people like me before, they're like, oh, I don't know. She doesn't look like a sound person. It's all going to be a mess. And they're that sort of anxiety. Never had that with him. He just cracked on. I cracked on. And it was fine. Eventually we're talking about my Jamaican heritage. And, oh, yeah, I've been to Jamaica. It's nice. It was good from the director, Leslie Linker-Glatter. Very nice lady. Very nice, really supportive and encouraging and stuff like that. I mean, we did have a couple of challenges because some of the locations, they hadn't done a location recce for sound because when they shoot in New York, they don't because they've been shooting for so many years. The sound recordist who does the New York side of it knows all the locations, so they don't send sound on recce's. So they did the same for the Morocco Splinter unit. Well, the problem is because they didn't do a recce, I'd asked if I could go on. They said, oh, no, we never do that. One of the locations we turned up at was just hell on wheels because there were so many noises and so many things. And they're going, oh, yeah, I see what you mean now. Do what you can. Okay, I'll do what I can. And off we went. It was really good. We only had one mishap where there was a sequence where a couple of heavies dragging this guy in to be interrogated, and the guy had a radio mic on, and the heavies were local supporting artists, and they got really into the role and were really dragging him around. So we got the guy into the interrogation room. I fade up his mic. No mic. Where's his mic on? I know he's got a mic on. He's about to say something. No mic. So we have to cut. When we go and see him, his mic's been ripped off. The heavies had ripped his mic in pulling him. They pulled the mic apart and destroyed it. So we had to re-mic him, and then, but I mean, that there was no way we could legislate for the heavies being heavy, really. They're supposed to act heavy, not be heavy.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like it would be a challenging show because, the inside, the outside, they're running, there are people being dragged around, as you said. It looks like a serious sort of sound challenge.
It's I think it's one of those where what I learned from it was, I took a lot of learning from a show like that, is that I shouldn't get fazed by what the show's called, because at the end of the day, my skills are the same, whether it's Homeland, whatever it is. The fact that that person was somebody, I'm like, oh my God, it's Saul. Like, oh, big deal. It taught me a lot. It just taught me to be aware of certain things and not to be fazed. Because I think, I won't lie, I think me getting it, when I got the call from the American producers, I got it. I was like, I'm doing Homeland. Which, yes, I was pleased to be doing it, but I think I should have just cracked on as I normally do. I didn't have a bad experience with it by any means, but I think I made, in my own way, I made it go to my head a bit. And I'm sure some people are quite happy for things to be, yeah, I did Homeland. But it's not my personality. Really? Oh, me, Mrs. Big B, I did Homeland. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of...
Fair enough. One of the other shows that you worked on, which I really enjoyed, was The Capture.
Yes.
And how was that to work on?
Ron Perlman, Hellboy.
Yeah.
So lovely, so lovely. Really lovely show to do. Callum is very nice. Holiday is really good. Great script. 67 locations in London. Did you know London had 67 locations?
That's a lot.
It's a lot of locations. So every day we were at different places. Some days 3 places, because we were shooting in the same locations as oh god, that Sky show, Gangs of London.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were shooting. So either Gangs of London or had just left, or they were just about to come to the locations we were shooting on. So the 2 units were sort of avoiding each other's unit signs around London, because we were shooting at the foot of the Shard, then we were shooting up in the Shard, and then we were shooting in and around the city of London, shooting in the backs of cabs, car chases, all of that stuff. Lot of, you saw the CCTV cameras around the place, shooting down in Stratford, loads and loads of locations. Really good show to work on. I'd just done Britannia, so I'd been doing historical drama and then went on to contemporary drama. So what's good about that? It sharpens up your skills because you have slightly different issues to deal with. When you're on historical drama, you're usually out in the middle of nowhere, in the forest, in the woods, don't usually have many frequency issues. But once you're in this center of London, the center of a city, you've got more stuff that you need to prepare for, because it's just that bit busier frequency-wise, and contemporary costumes aren't necessarily radio mic friendly. There's not so many places you can hide things. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So lastly, and I'll let you get back to work or back to your dog.
No, he's there. No, he's good.
Okay. So for someone going into what you're doing, what skills, so like if you're hiring a new assistant, what skills would you want them to come with, whether that's technical or personal?
Attitude, 100%. Attitude and punctuality. I will leave you if you're late. I will leave you if you're late. If we are leaving at 8 o'clock and 8:05 you're not here, I'm gone. You know, when it just is the way it is, because time's money. You can't, obviously if something catastrophic happens, it happens to everyone. That's fine. But if you get somebody who habitually shows up, not maybe massively late, but if the unit call is 8 o'clock and they show up at 1 minute to, that's not late, but that's just showing that you are keen to be here. I'm not saying you need to be there at 6:30, but at the same time, I think the number one thing is attitude. How do you feel about being here? Do you want to be here? And are you going to work? Can you do the job? And will you fit in? Do you want to work amongst these sort of people? Because some people have a kind of attitude that, oh, I don't like these people, I don't want to work with them. The technical skills you can teach anyone with a degree of intelligence. The thing that you can't teach people is common sense. If somebody, you can have a highly qualified, knowledgeable person who knows, flux capacity, density, and whatever the terms are, but doesn't have the appropriate people skills. And that's difficult, because if you have somebody who doesn't have good people skills on the set, it can cause problems, because you'll ask them to do things, and because they don't know how to speak to another department properly, or they haven't got a sense of awareness about the actors getting ready for a very emotional scene. They're really not interested in your Insta page at this moment. So there are people who are incredibly knowledgeable, but I wouldn't have on set, because they're dangerous, because they don't understand that just because you've seen this person on TV, they're not your mate. Don't try and take a picture with them. Don't show them your little film that you've just made or your script you've just written. That's a no-no. And so the most important thing is to have good people skills. We can teach you the other stuff. We can teach you the craft, and we're happy to teach you the craft. What I get a lot of when I get trainees come to see me is, well, I've done a lot of recording. Good for you. I'm not here to teach you recording. If you're here as an assistant, that's what I would like for you to do. Bring your initiative to that. And what I find sometimes as well is that some trainees come on and they don't understand that the most simple job might be the most important. So, for example, I had a trainee once who came on and he was very annoyed that I asked him to there's a special material that we put on the soles of shoes to make them quieter, because sometimes you've got a very large reverberant room and you've got somebody with hard-soled shoes on and they're going clump, clump, clump all the dialogue. So we put this treatment on the soles of the shoes to make them quieter. And I gave him that job. And he was most upset because he'd got a first-class degree in electronic engineering, but he was on as a trainee. And so he had a bag of this stuff and got given the shoes. Please treat all these shoes with this material. It's really important. So the first couple of days he did it. Third day, decided it was way beneath him, didn't feel like it needed to be done. So he did some and not all. So we did a scene and you could hear the shoes that had been treated and hear the shoes that hadn't been treated. And so it was a two-handed people walking along. One person's got it on their shoes, the other person hasn't. Completely ruined the track. And I played it to him. I said, what's wrong with this? And he said, oh yeah, those shoes are noisy, aren't they? I said, yeah. He said, oh, I get it now. He thought I'd given him the job as punishment. And it wasn't punishment at all. It is part of what the sound team have to do. When I was an assistant, I had to do that, run and get people's shoes. Some people had really smelly feet, but you still had to get the, and that was part of your training. And once you understood how important that component was in the overall acquisition of sound, you would do your best. So people coming in who want to be trainees, who want to come into this industry, bring a good attitude. Bring a good attitude. And one piece of advice I would give them is don't take it personally. There are still some people in the industry who are a legacy from the olden days. They're not quite retired yet. And sometimes I'll say some stuff which is absolutely off key. And you've just got to say, all right, that person said that. I'm not going to take it home with me. I'm going to leave it here and get on with what I'm doing. Unless the person is assaulting you or bullying, in which case I'll deal with it. There are times when people say stuff, you've got to let it wash off. If you take every little slight to heart, this industry is not for you. You do have to develop a resilience and understand that for everyone, it's a tough industry. For Black people, women, it's tougher again. And if you feel that you want people to make lots of accommodations because you're here, it's not the right industry for you. Obviously, in terms of bullying and those things, those are unacceptable. But in terms of just on a day-to-day basis, you've got to have some resilience. It's, as I say, it's not an industry for the faint-hearted. It just isn't. It's like saying you want to be a racing driver, but you can't drive very well. Maybe it's not for you then, Well,
that's very good advice. Thank you very much, Judi.
I hope that's helped.
It was very helpful. Yeah, it was very helpful. It was all great stuff. Thank you very, very, very much. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And you're still awake. That's a good start.
Yeah. This is great for me. I love this stuff.
All right then. Okay. Right, nice talking to you.
And
Thank
you as well.
Bye-bye.